Go. First thing I saw was cocktails.
Good afternoon
Open it
again,
up.
ladies and
beer and
gentlemen,
cocktails.
and welcome to the Satchmo Legacy Stage here at the 23rd Annual Satchmo Summerfest. Give yourselves a big hand for being here. This year, the Satchmo Summerfest is presented by the New Orleans Tourism and Cultural Fund. Give them a hand for helping us out. And this stage, the Satchmo Legacy Stage in memory of Joni Berry, is sponsored by the Joseph K. and Inez Eichenbaum Foundation, represented here by Mr. Stephen Maitland-Lewis. Give him a hand of applause. Also, the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation and Vicki and Richard Norwegian, who are, I'm sure, watching from New Jersey. They are great supporters of this festival. My name is John Polt. I will be your tour guide today and tomorrow. You are in for a real treat. We have a conversation with Don Vappie leading that conversation. The interlocutor is David Kunian. He's the music curator of this very museum of which you find yourself, the New Orleans Jazz Museum. Yes, give him a hand. His handiwork is all about this place. He's graduate of the musicology. He's a master's in musicology from Tulane University. And you still have a show on OZ?
I still have a 10 o'clock on Tuesday nights.
10 o'clock on Tuesday nights. It's OZ Fest here. Yeah, he's been doing that for nearly 30 years.
I'm in bed,
He has, among his radio work, includes a bunch of documentaries, that many of which have won awards. And in 2017, he received the Spirit of Satchmo Award from this very festival. Give him a big hand of applause, David Kunian. And to be interviewed is Don Vappie. He really needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. More recent. How about that? Of course, a native of New Orleans, but in 2021, he won the Steve Martin Banjo Prize. Give him a big hand. And then the following September, just this last September, he's inducted into the Banjo Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
Now, how many of you have Facebook during the pandemic? I will say, Don, I talked to you about it back there, but coffee on the porch with Don every morning was like a real coping mechanism for a lot of people all over the world. And it was fascinating to see who was on there, and I want to thank you for that. And also, one of his most recent album, The Blue Book of Storyville, was tagged as the top jazz album of 2020 by the Times of London. The guy gets around. Give him a big hand, Don Vappie.
Thank you.
Before we start, two things. One, we also want to thank John and Andy and Danny and Travis, who are working this stage and making it sound good and look good and smooth as possible. They're true professionals. And the second thing I want to say is, as you know, I'm the curator of this fine establishment. We put a lot of time and effort and take a lot of pride in what we present to you. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here and checking it out. It means a lot to us. So thank you so much. Don Vappie, one more time for him, too. All right, I guess I'm going to start off by just, the question that the great Jerry Brock has always said, this is how you should start your interviews. Where were you born, when were you born, and why were you born there?
All right. What was the first one? When?
When?
When was January 30th, 1956. By the way, Google has my birthday wrong, and I can't figure out how to change it. It says June, but it's January. And I was born in New Orleans. I don't remember what hospital, but I mean, we were living on the corner of Coliseum and Valence. And that's my grandmother. My mother's mother was living right down the street and across the street from that little church in that block. Mm-hmm. And, a whole bunch of people lived in that neighborhood. And
I was going to say, that's a huge music neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Neville and the Morrises are in there.
Teddy Riley lived around.
Teddy Riley's on
Bordeaux.
there. And
Deacon John.
Deke's in there. Was Monkey D back there around there back then?
Might have been.
God, yeah, that's a huge. That
As
whole
Cato
Valley
would
Street.
say, I was just a little baby at the time. I don't remember.
How did you start playing music? How did that all come about?
It's kind of, I guess, I don't know if it's weird or not, but my earliest memory was wanting to be a musician and have a family and be a musician. That was going to be like my job, you know. The family part was a lot harder. So, but anyway, I think it was important in the community. Like, I think maybe Creole culture, music's part of life. And everyone I knew had a piano in their house. So I would think all the kids around my age that I knew had piano lessons, whether they stuck with it or not. I ended up taking lessons from Richard Moten's mother, Marie, because we're cousins. And so I was about 6, I guess. And then I joined the school band, played trumpet, St. Joan of Arc, which I think we should put music back in the schools. I say this every time. It's just an injustice to not have it there. So then high school, I continued. I ended up getting braces on my teeth. In fact, my dentist was a brother-in-law of Narvin Kimball. So it was all connected, man. And so I couldn't get my mouth on that mouth. I went to like a trombone or a baritone horn. Mm-hmm. But I had this thing. I really wanted to be a bass player. And I still think bass is the most powerful instrument in the band in a lot of ways. But ended up playing guitar because we couldn't find a guitar player for our garage band. And I was kind of watching the guys that we had for a little bit. And I said, I could figure that out, which I ended up sitting at the piano, figuring out my chords, and then working out where I could grab those notes within the reach of my left hand on the fingerboard of the guitar. I learned a weird way. Dr. John said, damn, you did it the hard way. So
you're self-taught on guitar?
Yeah, but
Okay.
I mean, I had a music education, so I wasn't like, completely self-taught about music. I had a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, guitar is self-taught. And in college, I majored in bass. And I have to give him credit. His name was Bob Rowe. He was the principal bassist in the symphony here in the 70s. And all of his lessons were so, logical that I've applied all of the things he taught me about approaching the bass as a string instrument to any string instrument I play. So thank you, Mr. Rowe. He's up there now,
So this, I'm assuming this garage band was not playing Basin Street Blues and stuff like that.
No, I was playing Buddy Miles,
Okay.
Down, 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 down,
So you were playing kind of like rock and roll and
through some changes. I was playing that kind of stuff, And so yeah, I mean I grew up playing the music of but still, my generation was exposed to more than generations are now. Everything is kind of in. If you want to look at something, you look at this channel. You want to look at something else, you look at that channel. Listen to this radio station or whatever. We heard everything. We had, not trying to date myself, but we had shows like variety shows like Ed Sullivan and all. We have all kinds. You see a guy spinning plates, and they have the saber dance. So I mean, I heard that music, and I heard the music from movies. They brought us to the symphony. I saw that at the Orpheum, So we were just exposed to more, and I think it's just so much of an injustice not to expose young people to as much as you can. Let them see magic. Let them see music, symphonies, all kinds of music, ballet, opera, everything, because you never know. They're individuals. They're going to find something that touches them. So, yeah,
I'm with you. I'm with you because not only will might they find something they go, oh, I want to do that, but it just in general enriches their lives and makes them more fulfilled and happier people. I find.
I think so.
So you're in this garage band. playing the rock and roll music at the time. What happens to that?
Well, I continued doing that into my late teens and even in college, though I was playing in the jazz band at school and had played in, jazz ensembles in school. I continued playing I call it funk bands, the soul music and stuff. And I guess it was in my 20s when the tune Bad Mama Jamma came out. You know this one. I was playing bass in the band, and a lot of these songs are very repetitious. It's like don't, and again, da da, and he repeated. So we did that for 20 minutes one night at this club in Thibodeau, and I just thought, you could teach a chimpanzee to do this. This was like a trick. It's like you could teach an animal, some other animal, to do this. And that was probably what I thought. But I think deep down I was just wanting, my tastes were becoming, I don't want to say more refined, but more diverse, I wanted more. I wanted more harmony, more exploration, more musical diversity. And, it's like a conversation. You talk about the same thing every day, you get bored, right?
So did you quit the band and start trying to figure something else out?
Yeah, I quit the band and initially quit playing music for about 3 months. I was working at Orleans, selling musical instruments, and I sold all my stuff. And 3 months later, tried to buy most of it back, and I couldn't. My vintage Fender Telecaster, my Les Paul Custom, all those instruments that if I had now, I could sell and pay off my house.
Right.
But but then, I did get a hold of a guitar, and I'd wake up in the morning about 5:36, and play along with a Kenny Burrell record before I would go to work. And it was a John McLaughlin record I had in 1979, I think it was called Electric Guitar, Electric Dreams. And he had a solo, it was a short one, but he played it on a banjo. And I always remembered that sound. And the sound of banjos is not foreign to me because I grew up here. I mean, I've heard them. Just like the sound of Creole French. French doesn't sound like a foreign language. I have no idea what you're telling me most of the time, but it just doesn't sound like a foreign language, so yeah, and now I'm just trying to exist in all those things and learn French better and, la-di-da.
So you get a guitar, you're playing along with Kenny Burrell. Did you then find other people to play modern jazz, or was it more kind of the New Orleans stuff, or both?
No, it was. In fact, the band I played with is called Track One, and they're still playing. Like Tracy Griffin, and he's still around doing the band, and I play with them sometimes. But I wasn't trying to play any jazz gigs. I ended up playing with trios, like who can I say? Lloyd Lambert, Teddy Riley, and I was doing these little trios, like we get little trio gigs. And, my first thought was, wow, man, I play jazz. I could be home in bed by 10:30. Because otherwise I was home at 3:30 or 4:30 in the morning, But it was more interesting, too. So,
what kind of places would you play? What were the gigs like?
They were mostly like convention, private parties, hotel parties for convention-related stuff, or house parties, that kind of stuff. It's funny, I got hold of the banjo because this guy in the band says, man, I think you ought to play the banjo because the tourists really like it. And, I was thinking about it anyway because I always liked the sound of it. I don't know if you're familiar with like funk guitar playing. A lot of times you play these single note lines like that kind of stuff. Well, you have to mute the string and really play percussively to get that type of sound. Well, banjo's perfect for that. It's just, it's already made for that. I mean, Earth, Wind & Fire should have had a banjo player just for that part, James Brown. I mean, all these people, they don't realize it. But then when I look back, I think, the banjo is probably more integrated into what we do than we realize. Because even when I listen to the guys in Mali, and I know they're not necessarily called griot there, but they tell the stories and they play the goni, or in Senegal it's the halam, and they play melodic lines. Doom ding, doom ding, doom ding ding, da doom ding, doom ding, doom ding ding, da doom ding. They repeat that over and over, and they tell stories or keep a history and things like that. Well, that's exactly what the bass lines do in soul music from the 60s and 70s. The bass line pretty much defines what song you're playing, Dum, 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 ba-dum, dum, 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 ba-doo-da-dum. If you're into that, that's Brick House, right? So, and then there's a lot of songs like that where the bass line, that melodic line is repeated over and over, which reminded me so much of the music in Mali. So,
Well, and probably y'all know this and you know this, but the banjo isn't, you don't think it's not portrayed that way, but it's an African instrument.
right.
Middle Passage, I don't think they brought them, but the minute they got here, they're like, how do we make the banjo kind of thing?
And my generation hated it. Because for us, as Winton said one time, Winton Marsalis, we were doing the American Creole, he said, the banjo has a plantation connotation.
Yeah.
So we always thought of it as, oh man, you playing the banjo for the white folks, you Uncle Tom and blah, blah, blah. And, after doing some research and just reading, I realized that, this is an instrument that belonged to African people, Caribbean people, and it's part of the culture. And I wondered, probably it could only happen in America, but how can one people cause another people to hate something that belongs to them? So I started playing the banjo with this, vengeance, like this. I'm gonna play it.
Taking it back.
Yeah, and that's funny. I did an album with Otis Taylor called "Recapturing the Banjo,"
Oh, yeah.
and I told him, I said, "Well, man, I'm from New Orleans. We never really let it go. We didn't have to recapture it. It stays here.
Yeah.
It's still here." So.
Do you like playing the banjo more than you like playing the guitar, or is there a difference? Or
There's a difference. I do like playing the banjo, but I like playing music, so I really like playing bass too, and I really like playing guitar. And but yeah, I can be quite creative on the banjo.
were there certain banjo players you listened to when you were, starting to play it, guys in town or out of town? And you said, John McLaughlin at one, you heard that solo, but
I'd heard Danny Barker because I was on a gig with him one time with Bob French. I was playing bass, and I remember playing my solo. Everybody played all this stuff, their own improvisations on top of the form, and it was kind of out there, which was fine. It's just I thought, well, I'm just going to play the melody, and I played the melody on the bass, and Danny Barker turned around with amazement in his eyes, like, "Young man, you're going to go a long way playing the melody." It's really nice. And but yeah, I checked out Ike Robinson on some of Jabo Smith's recordings. Caught my ear, some of the stuff he did. I can't say I really listened to a whole lot of different banjo players. I'd heard bluegrass before, I mean, we had the Beverly Hillbillies when I was growing up, which I think is a really funny show. But the music is killing.
yeah.
And, growing up in the community sometimes, and I think this is a byproduct of racism, man, of that. You're so used to being, is it oppressed? Is that the word? That you tend to strike out at anything that's not in your community, or like, just push it away. But you really have to have an open mind, and I had an open mind. I still have an open mind. I like a lot of different stuff. I'm into the Brazilian stuff right now. Well, that's one of the things I love to listen to, the choro and the guitar and cavaquinho players.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Is there certain kind of New Orleans music or that you gravitate to on the banjo? Certain tunes or people?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I sort of like, I like anything. I like playing, I'm into writing my own stuff now. I waited long enough. Got on Medicare, now I'm writing my own stuff. So, but yeah, I like, Allison Brown, she's a 5-string player. And when they gave me the Steve Martin Prize, they presented it to me, and she said, I play such beautiful chords. And I only got 4 strings. So I was trying to, okay, what's she trying to tell me? And I think it's my experience in jazz that I've in learning to play the guitar only has 6 strings, but you can't play all 6 all the time. So you have to decide which notes are the important ones in the chord to create the color that you're looking for. So, okay, yeah, y'all better leave now because I'm getting real deep. Theory. No, but like a B flat 13 chord, I mean, this is not really rocket science. If you know any music, there's 7 notes in the scale, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then you're back to C, which is the 8th note. And if you keep going up, D, E, F, E, and count them, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's what that means. You play the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. That's all the notes they are. So I realized which ones really created the color. And even though the banjo only has 5 strings, if I'm playing like a B flat 13 chord, all I really need to play is the 3rd note of the scale, the 7th, and the 13th. So those 3 notes create that color for that sound. And in context, sometimes you need the root to say where you're going, but in the context of a progression, you can, it's kind of like Pig Latin, man. You learn how to talk that way,
I wanted to ask you, given that you're playing, King Oliver in a minute, and I've seen you do the rare Jelly Roll Morton stuff. What about that, attracts you? What do you like about that? How is it to play that?
The first time I did it was in New York with Winton and Dr. Michael White. He had this concert for Johnny Dodds. I think that was it. Anyway, it really piqued my interest because I don't just go by what you can tell me something and I really appreciate it, but I'm gonna go look it up and I'm gonna verify these things and get my own take on it. Especially when you're talking about art or music, you have to see it for yourself and you have to absorb it individually, because that's what art and music is. It's all about how each individual accepts it. So when I listened back to some of the early recordings, my first thought was, we got a symphony here playing this, Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and Haydn and all these people. And that's great. That's some great stuff. But man, this early New Orleans stuff, Jelly Roll Morton, the stuff we're going to do at 3:30, the King Oliver Creole Jazz Band. I know somehow I think it's a little bit diminished in that, oh yeah, they're just improvising. Oh no. You can say it like, you could also think of it as they're doing some spontaneous composition polyphonically. In other words, everybody's composing in the moment, but it's one piece that fits together. I mean, I think that's just, I think it's genius, man. Jelly Roll Morton stuff, Black Bottom Stomp, his arrangement of the chant, he didn't write that one, but I just thought this stuff was so classic. I said, we'll start a band, we'll do it. Called it the Creole Jazz Serenaders, Bob French says, "Oh, you Creole, you ain't black no more, huh?" I said, "No, no, bro. It ain't about that. It's cultural differences, man. Creole's a culture, you know." Anyway, that's like I said, you know.
So it kind of attracted you because of the just the spontaneous composing and such.
It's exciting music. It's good music. It's really good music, like Pop said. It's just good music and bad music. This is good music. It's very advanced. But anything you hear today came out of with Jelly Roll, Oliver, Astoria 8, all those bands way back then. The music we play today came out of that. Sidney Bechet, in his solos, implied a lot of the more complex chord extensions that we use today. It's, not to be, academic about it, but geez, man, it's just people were really geniuses,
And the thing I always hear in all of it, it's bizarre, is that it's not only very up here music, it's genius music, it's incredibly complex, but it's also, dance music of the streets of New Orleans. I go out, and when I'm thinking of King Oliver and Jelly Roll Morton, Dodds Brothers, Sam Morgan, those dudes, I not only hear that, but I go out in the streets and I hear what they were, New Orleans has changed, and it hasn't changed a whole lot, but I still hear those rhythms, those melodies, when I go out at second lines or when I'm out, at festivals or, out hearing music, I hear that stuff. It's still very much music of this city.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not get drunk and party music. That's the thing. I think it's music for everyone. It's dance music. It's storytelling. I mean, Jelly Roll had a tune called Boogaboo, and I mean, it's got a little groove to it, but when I listen to it, it's like the trumpet player starts, and it's like I can see him sitting in one of these corner bars. Like, I don't know if you ever been in one in New Orleans, like off Washington Avenue or something. You go in, it's a little neighborhood bar, right? You go in and sit there, and it's like this guy's in that bar trying to talk to this girl, and he's saying this thing, that bad. Yeah, baby, he's going at it. And then the clarinet player comes in after and said, dude, you don't want to talk to him, talk to me. It's like, it's great. It's just, I hear these stories in my head,
Yeah. When I listen to it carefully, it's the same thing.
I see them, man.
One other thing I want to ask you, since you have brought up the term, explain for those who might not know, Creole culture, Creole music.
Well, the term Creole has meant many things over time. At one time, it just meant that you were from Spain and you were born here. But at this point in time, my definition of Creole is a culture. It's a sort of a Caribbean culture that has a diverse input from very diverse cultures that come together and they become one. New Orleans, by many historians, is considered the most northern part of the Caribbean. And having been to the Caribbean, having been to Europe, having been in a lot of places, I see that, yeah, it is we get things from everybody. And it all comes together. It's like, even when I was young, I look in the mirror and said, you know what? At some point in time, everybody in the world is going to look like me because I got this real diverse background. So, and I look at pictures like my grandmother and her siblings. They look, if you take them separately, they look like they're from different places in the world, but they're brothers and sisters. And my mother, a picture of her with her elementary class out in Donaldsonville in that area, in Welcome, Louisiana. They look like just a gathering of, people from all over the world, and it's just they get along. So, and it's accepted. Creole is just at this point, Creole is the culture that we have here in New Orleans, Southeast Louisiana Creole, and that's the way I look at it. I don't even like to think of myself as I don't like the term race. Like, they used to put race on, when I was in high school, they give you this stuff, name, address, race. I'd put Indy 500 in my, when it's, it's like, yeah, well, Preakness. You know what I mean?
Boston Marathon.
Yeah. So I just think it's stupid, man.
Is there something about Creole music that makes it different from other kinds of music?
Yeah, a lot of the Creole music goes back, as Sybil Kine would say, 300 years or more. And a lot of it it's dance music. It's in this French lyric, like Creole French lyric. It's not necessarily complex chord-wise. It's usually like the 1 chord and the 5 chord, or some combination of that. And tunes like "Et là-bas," and they're syncopated, so it's really, and it has a lot of the things we think about with jazz. The call and response can be in there. The dance. One of my favorites is Pops Foster playing on Saladin Bonjour with Danny Barker and Albert Nicholas and James P. Johnson. The bass line he plays, and he's got this. He's not just going dum 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 dum. He's like boom ding dum boom dum 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 boom dum bing dum boom bing dum. I mean, you can't get more syncopated than that, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know Scott Joplin was important in ragtime, and that's great, but I think we have excluded Creole music and Creole culture as an influence in jazz. And because maybe we lump it all together with black people, with African American. And but that's kind of an American thing too. You're either white or you're not.
Right.
So
And as you're saying, Creole culture has similarities to, lack of a better term, African American, but they're not. It's not the same.
no, it's not. I mean, African music doesn't sound like that.
No.
But it's influenced by African music. And I didn't realize that till I spoke to this African gentleman by the name of Oscar Mokime. He had a museum. Oscar, if you're hearing me, man, call me up. Look me up on the web, because I don't know where you at. I don't even remember where I met. Somewhere in Virginia, maybe. He had a house. He created a museum, African museum. And I remember being on the road and going in, and I introduced myself. I said, man, I'm from New Orleans. I know African music got something to do with New Orleans, but I don't know what African music sound like. So we just talked for about 3 hours, 4 hours. Got a video from him it was a video which showed all his ceremonies he went through as he was growing up, and the music that went with it, and the people dancing. And he even gave me a modern day African band that he thought kept some of the tradition in the music. But most importantly, because, everybody's in a box in America. Which box do you tick? I remember getting married. They said I had to be black, white, or other. And I mean, other was Hispanic, I think. They didn't even room for like American Indians. I mean, it was so stupid. And I said, well, what sense does this make? I had an argument with the lady.
Right.
And my wife, to-be wife, was like, just tell him anything, let's get married.
Keep arguing, we're not going to be able to get it.
You'll never do it. And, but, you feel some responsibility to. I mean, I took advantage of minority loans when I went to college. And I made sure and paid them back because I didn't want them to think bad about my people.
Mm-hmm.
We pay back, we do what we got to do. But then, I'm older now, and I know that there's no one group of people on the planet that has a monopoly on being yeah, it almost came. I forgot was, idiots. There's idiots in every group of people. So.
recently, as John was saying when explaining your career, you're in the Banjo Hall of Fame. You've gotten the Steve Martin Award. What does this mean to you? Does this important to you, or do you care about these things? Is there? I know some folks are like awards, whatever, but what does it mean to you?
I'm proud of him. I'm proud of him. Well, Steve Martin came with some money, so that was really cool.
Right.
Of course, all they did was fix the roof after, I think it was Ida or whatever hurricane we had at the time.
Hard to keep track of all this.
But, being acknowledged by your peers, and the Banjo Hall of Fame was great. And I realized that Danny Barker was not in there. So I nominated him because that's one thing. As a member, as an inductee, I get to nominate people for the next year. So, but I think it's important. I'll tell you what's really important to me in a weird way. Someone painted a likeness of me on a utility box on Poydras. And it's like, damn, I made it.
I'm going looking for that next time.
I couldn't believe it. I took a picture of it. I said, could that be me? Because it was really pale, too. And I don't think I'm quite that white, but I could be in someone else's eyes. And that's okay. But it was just the idea of being acknowledged by your hometown, That's important. I mean, as much as we want to say, man, I don't care what people, I think it's important that we embrace each other and acknowledge what we do,
And especially because, people, this is true, so many great musicians in New Orleans have not been acknowledged while they've been here, or even today aren't acknowledged the way they should be.
Yeah. And, with technology was changing in the 70s, the computer and personal computer and recording technology and all that. And I remember thinking, it doesn't matter where you live. You can probably do whatever you want. You don't have to go to New York to make it, or you don't have to go wherever. And in a way, I'm right, In another way, there's a machine that works in New York and Nashville. That's why they're the recording hubs of the country. New York, Nashville, L.A., Toronto. That's where the big business happens. So I understand leaving to go there. I just didn't want to.
I have also always thought that in terms of playing jazz, funk, R&B, all kind of, that kind of music, that if you really want to play it right, you need to come here for about 6 months at least. You need to get the sense of how that, especially jazz, and all kinds of jazz, not just the New Orleans style jazz. But I think you need to come here and hang out for a while and hear how it is done here. Not that necessarily you need to play it that way, but it will inform your music in a way that will help you play it better.
Yeah. I think with the availability of all the recorded music in today's world, if you could actually get an idea of things from listening to different styles of music. But the main thing is being open to it. That's the main thing. It's just like learning another language. You can learn how to say merci beaucoup, or you can try to imitate the song of that language. Like a friend of mine taught me how to say, "You telling me, idiot." But he said, don't say that to a policeman. But it's not just saying it, it's like the song of "C'est moi que tu dis ça." If you speak French, I'm not talking to you. But it's like, you telling me. You're like, like it's kind of like a comeback, and then you add a little expletive and call them a, rear end. So, but that's important. The song,
Yeah.
and the music is a song. I think that's why I'm a good mimic. I used to go on the road and come back at home to my wife Millie. I would imitate everybody in the band that we met and all. So when we go back out on the road, I didn't have to introduce anybody because she knew everybody just by their, from my imitations, my, you know. I'm not going to do any.
Any other folks that you have been played with in your time that you've enjoyed playing with and influenced you in any way?
That's funny, man. Everybody's influenced me. You know, Teddy Riley. I mean, these older guys that I knew, and I'm not just trying to say the old guys, but it's not so much all the time what they played, but the way they treated. Warren Bell Sr., let me mention him. Y'all probably don't even know him. You know Warren Bell Jr., the newscaster, right? His dad was a phenomenal saxophone player. And yeah, he was in Dookie Chase's band. In fact, and if you go to Dookie Chase, if you go to Dookie on Orleans, in the bar, you see a picture of me and him together in the bar. But we played together one night, and he called a song "What's New," and I did not know that song. I'd never heard it. And the drummer says, "Oh man, you hear it?" I'm like, "Yeah, right." So I played something so not what that was. And Mr. Bell was so cool about it. He said, let's just take it out. And he played something. He just played it out. And I went home that night and learned it. And that picture is me apologizing to him. And we're both laughing because what I played was so wrong. But it's just the way he handled it, you know. And like he was caring about it. So that was a real good lesson. He's a person that stays with me, man. Mm-hmm. He'll always be with me. Willie Humphrey. One night I'm playing the banjo, and you know I'll play chords and I'll cut them off like chump, chump, chump instead of jang, 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 jang. So I'm playing chump, chump, chump. He says, "Young man, I'm used to hearing the banjo ring." I said, "Yes, sir, no problem." Jang, 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 jang. And afterwards, he appreciated my respect for him. So. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I think in everything in life, it all comes down to learning to appreciate, respect, and accept each other. Because, I mean, in anything you do.
Right. I got two more questions. One, given the fact that this is Satchmo Summerfest, I feel like I have to ask you, what does Louis Armstrong mean to you? Musically, culturally, as a figure? You know, in any way, shape, or form?
Man, you know, it wasn't until I heard the Hot 5 and Hot 7 tunes like Skip the Gutter and Fireworks that I realized how phenomenal this guy really was. And knowing that he cared about people. Everybody that I've met anywhere in the world that has had known him personally has always spoken of him with kindness and the respect. And I think, well, musically he's the greatest. I mean, but he had that ability to really make music a language and communicate with you. So when he played, he wasn't playing some notes. He was actually speaking to you. And from that, I developed my motto, which is, if you're going to play music, speak the truth. And, you know, it's not about the notes you're playing. It's about how genuine and truthful you are when you're doing it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he's always going to have that, man. And it's about time we celebrate him here, you know.
Agreed. Agreed. You're playing King Oliver what time?
3:30.
3:30. One of the stages.
Yeah, right back here on
right
Barracks.
back on the Barracks Street.
And I just want to say that, you know, it's a 100-year anniversary to that recording of the King Oliver Creole Jazz Band. And in my opinion, that group, that recording, is the epitome of the New Orleans jazz style. My opinion.
So if you don't know it, listen to it, we will say. Besides this, do you have any future projects, recordings, that kind of thing coming out gigs?
Well, I just got back from France. I'm only now getting to tour with my album, The Blue Book of Storyville, because it was in 2020. It was the top jazz album in the Times, but then the pandemic, we couldn't do anything. So we're just now really doing some touring.
Mhm.
And I got back. This was crazy. I flew back from Paris on the 17th of July, and on the 18th flew back to Geneva, Switzerland, because I couldn't work out the logistics otherwise. And I spent a week with Wynton Marsalis in Verbier, which was up on a mountain, and the air was thin, it's dry. My nose started to bleed because I'm from New Orleans, right?
You're a Flatlander.
And so all the way, and the plane was late coming home. So the whole way home on the plane, my head is leaking. You know, I had to spend the night in D.C. because the plane was late. My head's leaking all night. I'm leaking. I get on the plane in New Orleans. I'm leaking. Open the door of the plane, step off in New Orleans, hot and humid, and for some reason I go, thank God. I was so happy to be here in this miserable heat, but I could breathe. I felt like a fish that had just, throw me back in the water, please. But yeah, I'm planning on writing more and doing some more recording. I want to do more than just what we normally have heard on the banjo. The banjo is a great melodic instrument, and hopefully I can insert a couple of my own compositions in this performance we're going to do. Well, one of them I'm hoping we can do is, I call it Color of Creole, or Couleur de Creole, and it's based on the form of an early New Orleans jazz, like high society has 3 parts, 4 parts. Well, same thing in Brazil with choro, has 3 parts. You play the first part, you repeat it, then you play the second part, you repeat it, and you go back to the first part one time, then you play the third part. It's that kind of thing. And I think it's similar influences, common influences, like maybe French quadrilles or that have been changed around or something. But I wrote this tune with that in mind. And then, Color of Creole was my way of saying there is no color. It's a culture. So.
All right, well, we got to roll, but y'all, Tom Vappie, yo. Member of the Banjo Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
John, you around? All right, well, next up on this fine stage.
He's coming.
You coming? Okay. All right, he's around.